This program is part of a larger initiative that we're doing here in Los Angeles, thanks to our friends at the Smithsonian and their initiative, Our Shared Future, Reckoning with Our Racial Past. And we're partnering with La Plaza de Cultura y Artes and also with the Chinese American Museum on a number of programs for the next 2 weeks. And we hope you'll come back, see our programs, see their programs. You can find a listing on our website, janum.org, and the newly relaunched janum.org/democracy. We also invite you to come back on December 17th, 2 Sundays from now, for a family day where we hope you'll be able to maneuver between all 3 of our institutions. We are 3 institutions separated by a freeway but connected not only by streets but also by metro. It's just 1 stop away. I want to thank our sponsors. The national sponsor for the initiative is Bank of America. Our media sponsor is LAist, whereas I've heard them saying lately, if anybody listens to them, LAist, which I don't, okay, I was listening to them like, okay, that's what we're going with. And then also presenting with us today is Search to Involve Filipino Americans, and we'll hear a little bit more about them in a little bit. I want to thank the Smithsonian for trusting us. This is the first time they are doing this type of programming outside of DC. And they came here because we're fantastic in Los Angeles. We are home to the largest populations of various racial and ethnic and national communities outside of their home nations. Our food scene is absolutely incredible, and you can find just about any kind of food, and that's why we're here to talk about that today. And I'll be talking about a little bit about that more in a minute. I do want to send a special shout out to our friends from the Smithsonian who are here with us today, Dr. Deborah Mack and Travis Collins, and Linda Pickup from DC. And so thank you so much for all your support. We really appreciate it. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jim Hurt, and I'm the director of the Daniel K. Inouye National Center for the Preservation of Democracy. We just relaunched Democracy Center on Friday. It's been about a year of trying to figure out how we were going to do things, what we were going to do, testing things out. And so now we're kind of on the way. And we now also added the senator's name to the center because of his vision for what the Democracy Center could be. Here at Janum, as you know, we lean heavily on the Japanese American experience and tell their story of what it is to be an American through that lens. And here at the Democracy Center, we are a program of Janum. And we lean on that incredible history that Janum has collected over the years, the collection, the stories, the people, the artifacts, the community that has been developed in order to contemporize it for other audiences, for other communities. And we look for solutions to issues facing our democracy, because every day it seems like democracy is under attack. And how do we stop that? How do we continue to fight back and make people understand that our stories as Americans are just as valuable as those from Western societies? We believe that it shouldn't matter what you look like or where you come from, who you worship or who you love, what your economic status is or what your immigration status is, or whether you're old or young. We all have the same roles, rights, and responsibilities within this democracy, and that those who are now actively seeking to stop that cut at the very heart of what it means to be an American. So we're talking about reckoning with our racial past. So how does food culture fit into that? So we had a really, really heavy day of programming on Friday, and not just in everything that we were doing, but the topics were really heavy. They were really hard-hitting discussions about race in this country, particularly at the intersection of wealth, health, and the arts. But not all conversations have to be that heavy. They can be fun, particularly when you involve the arts. And so much of the programming that ourselves and our sister program organizations put together revolve around food, because I think that's what brings people together. I wanted to know out there, and please don't be shy, what is your favorite dish?
Sushi.
Sushi.
Rendang.
What was it?
Rendang.
Okay.
Oden.
Then?
Lox and cream cheese.
What was that?
Lox and cream cheese on a bagel.
Oh, with some capers and tomato. Oh, now I'm so hungry. I have Christmas to eat. We've been so busy. Anybody else?
Empanadas.
Empanadas. What kind of empanadas?
Colombian. Beef.
Colombian. Okay. Do you know the Argentinian place on Sawtell?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How does that rate?
They use flour, we use corn.
Oh, where can we get some?
In West Covina.
In West Covina. Okay, I will drive out there sometime. On my way to Needles next time I go out. Somebody in the audience knows that inside joke about Needles. So, I have a number of favorite dishes, and for those of you who don't know me, I moved to Los Angeles in the mid to late 90s, originally from outside Philadelphia. And my parents had retired to Florida years before I ever even moved down here. And my dad and I were out fishing one day, and in the Gulf, and he was like, "So, your mom's cooking your favorite dish." And without missing a beat, I said, "Meatloaf?" And he's like, "No, chicken adobo." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "You don't like chicken adobo?" And I said, "Well, Dad, we had it every day, growing up. It was a treat when we got meatloaf." And so, I don't know if he was completely satisfied with that answer, but, and I also had some trauma around adobo because I grew up in an all-white community, and you bring chicken adobo to lunch just one time, and you're forever the kid with the weird food. So, but having moved to Los Angeles and connecting with other people, other Filipino Americans, other Asian Americans, I began to reconnect with that culture through food. And I often wondered, my mom's had sort of a certain rotation, and I don't want to jump too much into our conversation, but I realized a lot of that rotation was just because those were the ingredients that she could find. And so I think, what if she had a seafood city next door that we could have gone shopping for? So it's those kinds of things that mean so much to us when we think about culture. As I said, I grew up in an all-white family. My father's side of the family was so welcoming of my mother and myself. One of my cousins, Helene, who's we're the tail end of the cousins here. She actually went on to be a somewhat renowned chef. She was the executive chef at the Getty. She actually opened the Getty's restaurant and food services, and then she went up to Google and was the executive chef up there. And if you know anything about Google and their food service, that was specifically done there to create a culture. But she, in an interview one time, said that, her mother, my aunt, our other aunt, my grandmother, they weren't really great in the kitchen. We didn't get a lot of besides meat and potatoes. And she credited my mother with coming into the family with really opening her eyes to what kind of food culture is out there, and that there's more than just meat and potatoes, or you could do them differently. So today, is also talking about cross-cultural influences, how our cuisines have influenced others, and how other cultures have influenced even our cuisines here. We also talk about culture in a very specific way because culture does seem to be under attack. I was reminded of a conversation the other night, with Dr. Mack, and she didn't bring this up, I was the one who brought this up, so you have plausible deniability. Lynn Cheney of Those Cheneys, 30 years ago, said that the only culture worth preserving in this country was Western culture. She wrote a book about how American culture was being subverted because other cultures were coming in, and not understanding that we were adding to a culture, and that it was foreign to her, so she didn't want to accept it. But food seems to be the gateway to culture, because I can't imagine this country or anybody in this country wanting a country that doesn't have a sushi restaurant, that doesn't have Korean barbecue, that doesn't have any kind of incredible cuisine or options to choose from. So how do we capitalize on that? How do we uplift not only our cuisine, but the rest of our arts, so that we can have a truly American canon of art. So we are joined today by some really incredible people. Our first, we'll bring them all out in just a second, but Curtis Chin, just so you know, if you don't know, was co-founder of the Asian American Writers Workshop in New York. He served as their first executive director, and he's been a writer, author, commentator. He has a book out now called Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, about growing up in Detroit in his family's restaurant, and we're going to hear a little bit about that. He's written for CNN, Bon Appetit, the Detroit Free Press, and that, by the way, his book has gotten incredible reviews and is like on the like favorite books or best books of the many best books of the year lists. And he's also been doing some work with America's Test Kitchen, and so it's really, I think we're going to have a really great conversation with him. Our other guest is Genevieve O'Brien, but the Genevieve is silent, so it's just Erin O'Brien, and they are based here in Los Angeles. They are a queer Vietnamese, Irish, German artist, storyteller, and chef. She is just like incredible. She had a Fulbright scholarship. For those in the audience, probably will think this is much more important. She was a visual communications armed with a fellow a few years ago, and if anybody doesn't know what that is, we will gladly explain that later. And she literally makes sausage. So I'm excited to hear about Meet My Friends, and it's MEAT. So Meet My Friends. And, how many people like sausage, by the way? Okay. How many of you know what scrapple is? Yeah. Okay. So scrapple, if you know, I grew up again outside of Philadelphia, and scrapple it's made from what is left over after they make sausage, and then after they make Spam, and then after they make and it's like the last stuff that's left. And that's from like the Pennsylvania Dutch side of my family. And so, yeah, so I have a wonderful affinity for any kind of spiced meats and sausages. So, and then our final guest today is going to be Johneric Concordia. His reputation precedes himself in this room, I'm sure. He's the chef and co-founder of one of our favorite restaurants, who is catering our reception later on today, the Park's Finest. Wonderful story about coming up in the community. He has done so much for the Filipino American community. He grew up not 2 miles from here in historic Filipinotown, and his story of connecting to SIPA, Search and Involve Filipino Americans, as a way of kind of staying out of trouble and learning about the arts, learning about culture, and most importantly, learning about activism and how important that is to communities. The community was there to support him as he tried on this venture and became very successful, and has given back in so many different ways to the community, including feeding first responders during the COVID crisis. So I'd like to bring our panelists out now, so please give them the next round of applause. No, put the mixed kids on the end. Okay. Always happens, right?
Yeah. It's the mixed game.
So Curtis, I want to kind of start out with you. This book has gotten such great, has been received so incredibly well. It must be so exciting. How long have you been working on this book besides your entire life?
Well, I actually started writing about, I sent myself an email about 10 years ago with these ideas, right, of writing this book. But it was a different type of book. It really was just more of a family comedy. But then after COVID, the murder of George Floyd, and the rise of anti-Asian hate, I shifted it so it became more about identity, social justice, racial politics, and things like that, and the coming out process. And so, yeah, it's been getting all this great praise. Just really so excited and shocked in some ways by the reception to the book.
So what was it like growing up in Detroit?
So the book is called Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, and as it implies, I grew up in a Chinese restaurant, but not just any Chinese restaurant. I like to think of it as the Chinese restaurant in Detroit. And the way I sort of stake my claim to this is I like to ask people to guess how many egg rolls we sold in the 60 years that we owned the business. And if you've read the book, you can't say it.
Okay, and so over 60
Over
years.
60 years, guess how many egg rolls we sold. And now these are all handmade, even the skin and the sauce.
A million?
A million? What else? Anybody else?
60 million.
We're popular, but not that popular. We sold over 10 million egg rolls. I mean, so it's really a popular restaurant. Yeah, I mean, it's, even to this day, so many people come out of the woodwork and ask us, are we going to reopen the restaurant? Because, you know, we closed it after my dad had passed away. And so, yeah, it was just a really wonderful place to grow up.
How many generations?
It was opened by my great-grandfather in 1940 in Detroit. And so it really had a place. Because my family actually had arrived in Detroit in the late 1800s. You know, and they did the whole traditional Chinese-American journey, doing the laundry first, and then opening a grocery store, and then finally opening up a restaurant. He opened one restaurant in 1939, and then a second restaurant, which is the one that I grew up in. That one was opened in 1940.
So those of us who are not familiar with Detroit, like, where was it? What was the neighborhood like? I'm sure it had changed over the years.
Yeah, Detroit was a really difficult time period, particularly in the era that I grew up. It was the 80s. Not only did you have the auto industry that was really struggling, but you had crack cocaine, you had AIDS. I knew 5 people murdered by the time I was 18, including Vincent Chin. And so, yeah, it was a really, you know, challenging place to grow up. But despite that, we had this really fabulous Chinese restaurant that my family raised me and my 5 siblings. And we were in the inner city. We were in the heart. We were in the worst neighborhood, right? You know, area called Cass Corridor, which is where all the drugs were and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yet somehow, you know, my parents were able to, you know, give us these great lives because of all the sacrifices they made through that family business.
So you've written a lot about food, though, over the years.
I'm starting to, because I was telling you guys in the back is that if you've read the book, you'll know that in my whole family, everybody could cook except for me. So I was always banished to the dining room, you know, to sort of set the table. And so no, I don't have except for eating all that food there, I didn't have a strong relationship with making the food. But that was one of the lessons I learned in life, was that, you know, despite the fact that I really wanted to be in the kitchen with everybody else cooking, you know, I had to at some point accept that that's not where I was meant to be, and that maybe being in the dining room with the customers and serving them was actually where my talents were and where I needed to be. And so, you know, that was, you know, a great experience for me, because I got to meet so many people through serving our food and talking about it. Yeah, so.
And then you work with, you're on a podcast that just got released, right?
Yeah, so I have started recently writing about food. So maybe I'll also share the first page if you guys are okay, just to sort of help you guys understand what the book is about. So the book is divided into 8 chapters, 3 sections of 8 chapters each, because that's 888, you know, for Chinese people. Okay. There are a lot of little Easter eggs like that in the book. So this is the prologue, and the prologue really covers my family's you know, journey to opening that restaurant, because I don't think you can understand a person's journey unless you know their family's history, and so that's why I wanted to start this way. Also because the book is really steeped in Detroit, because a lot of times when you hear about the Asian American narrative, it really is based on the East Coast or the West Coast. You don't really hear about us in the Midwest. So this is just the opening page, the prologue. Welcome to Chung's. Is this for here to go? Armed with a smile and a red waiter's jacket with a perpetual plum sauce stain, that's how my dad greeted any new face who entered the lobby of our popular Chinese restaurant in Detroit. Interestingly, my great-great-grandpa, Guang Li, had faced the same question in the late 1800s as he stood cold and alone on a rickety dock in Guangzhou, China, trying to decide his future and that of his young impoverished family. For here to go. For here to go, as I got older, it was a question I asked myself. Starting in our restaurant's long and open back kitchen, where my family made some of our most popular items, including the tangiest barbecue pork and best-smelling almond cookies, my mom taught me my first lessons. Before diving into math, English, and geography, she began with a little American history, tales of elders and ancestors, our family as prologue. And so the rest of that book is really about that fundamental question of, do I stay in my family, this wonderful restaurant where I grew up, despite the fact that the city's falling apart around, me, and, I'm struggling with my sexuality and all this stuff. And so, yeah, but in terms of food writing, so I wrote this book, and from it, now suddenly people think I'm this expert in food. And so I wrote a piece for Bon Appetit that got selected for Best American Food Writing last year. I got invited by a show called America's Test Kitchen to produce an episode for them about one of the dishes that are in this book. CNN has asked me to write like my favorite Chinese restaurants. I mean, so all of a sudden I'm a restaurant expert. How this happened. So yeah, it's. But I do like food.
Yeah, I think it's one of the lowest barriers to entry because we all eat, we all like to, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want to talk to Erin now. Erin O'Brien, I'm sorry. So Erin O'Brien, all one word. Remember, Genevieve is silent. So you and I both grew up in mixed race households, but you had, I think it's a benefit of seeing the world as a, what did you call it?
A dipshit.
Okay. So you've heard of army brats?
I coined the term dipshit because I was like, oh, so you're like an army brat. I'm like, no, it's very different, but it's the same. Foreign service, diplomats, little shits. Fancier than the army brats or dipshits.
So how many were in your family?
It's my dad, my mom, and my sister and myself. So I grew up mostly overseas. Which separated us both from the U.S. and from Vietnam. My mom's Vietnamese, and yeah, it was interesting because I think that food was that connection both to the U.S. and to Vietnamese culture for us being overseas. Mm-hmm. I never learned about American food except through banquet frozen dinners. My mother never made meatloaf or any of those things. I didn't know what they tasted like until I had the Salisbury steak. But, being a third culture kid, raised overseas with two or more cultures in a different culture other than my passport culture, I'm pretty sure my mom was the only Vietnamese person in Cameroon in the 80s, in Yaoundé, Cameroon. And she grew bean sprouts in our water filter, you had to filter the water because you couldn't just drink the water. And she would also grow bean sprouts in it. And the government gives you household effects so you can ship all your stuff. And in addition to furniture and things, we always had the now she calls it the Costco room, but it used to be, our food household effects, and it was rice noodles and rice paper and fish sauce and, all of those things, because we're not going to get those in the middle of Damascus. We could find them in the Philippines, but, in these places that we lived, that was that sort of touchstone to our whole culture. So, yeah.
So how was she, because we talked earlier specifically about Cameroon, so how was she able to keep that connection besides just growing her own bean sprouts?
I think, if you ask her, she just made it up as she went along. It was her and JJ Polonis, the Thai lady in Damascus, Syria, making sloppy joes every month for the special American dish. And they're we don't know what this is. Put some chilies in here in the meat. They're sloppy joes, So, I think for a lot of folks, it's always been a struggle if you're not in your home country. Mm-hmm. And, I kind of actually talk about it as food ghosts, right? There's a Vietnamese food that only exists pre-75 in Vietnam that now exists in the memory of Vietnamese diaspora. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're trying to eat. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't exist, It's here, the different round of veggies that go with the pho. You can tell how authentic the place is if they have the culantro. If they don't have that, you're I don't know. But maybe they just don't have it, I had a great bowl of pho in Saratoga, Florida, I didn't think that would happen. So, and in Senegal, they make chaya, the Vietnamese imperial rolls, because there's 5 Vietnamese people who ended up in Senegal, and like now it's like a Senegalese dish that is like famous that everyone knows. It's a Vietnamese spring roll. So, I mean, you adapt and you also like make shit up as you go along.
Yeah, I remember like, and maybe this was experienced with your mom as well, you know, trying to get us to fit into American culture and sometimes not being that successful. Like she would send peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with me when I told her no more adobo. And like, what's the worst jelly you can think for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Fish jelly.
Okay, well, no food for you. So she would make it with orange marmalade.
It's still technically a jam.
Still, yeah, but it's just,
Yeah, no, it's a no-go, yeah.
and she tried and I did appreciate it.
I mean, I had those battles in elementary school. We actually lived like 5th and 6th grade. We were in Virginia. Like whenever we were in the States, we were, near TC. And I remember being like, I have the sweetest Muppets lunchbox. Got my thermos. Can't you put some like stars and stripes, chicken noodle soup? It's not hard. You know, like why can't you put that in it? You know, and having those struggles as a kid, but then you know what happened in college, like in graduate school when I was in Chicago, like sitting on the floor in the studio of, you know, I did an MFA, so we sit on the floor, just like Vietnamese people. And I'm sitting there eating sticky rice, and I had a crowd of people leaning over me, and they're like, "What are you eating? Is that like bugs, man?" I'm like, "Dude, it's sticky rice. It's on Argyle Street. Like it's not weird." But like I think that always, you know. It is like to other people a weird thing. I mean, this is very unique to my family, obviously. My, oddly enough, grandmother and grandfather lived in Vietnam in the 50s. And he was there, my grandfather was there with USAID. But we all know probably what he was doing there. And, you know, my grandmother never ate Vietnamese food the whole 3 years she lived in Vietnam as a white woman, you know. And in a Chinese restaurant, she'll say, "Can you bring me some of my people's tea?" You know, like she's just, you know, I learned about racism through her, that's, you know, clearly. And she never had Vietnamese food until my dad and mom got married, you know. And she still insisted that my mom was trying to kill her with the Vietnamese food. Getting that rice stuck in her throat, you know, so.
Yeah. My grandmother, my mom used to have to cook special food for her, I don't think it was because she didn't really want it. She was just like set in her ways. But I think the same kids that used to make fun of the food I bring to school would be the ones that are so into like trying different foods. Now, I think when you're young, like you're trying to figure out, especially like around issues of race, you're trying to figure out how to other people. And that's one way to kind of immediately do it is like, your food's weird. I remember them being so fascinated with the 25-pound bag of rice. I'm like, can we see your bags of potatoes at home? Like, you know, it's not that different.
That's also a guest bed. For us children when the family comes to visit.
So thank you. We're gonna get into this a little bit more, but I want to turn to Johneric now. Sorry, now that you're drinking water, I made it just to the precise moment. The first time I remember meeting you was through Film Arts and through SIPA, and you know, your history of sort of like connecting with SIPA and connecting the community through arts, and then when did the kind of connection with food come in?
It came from the beginning, because if we were 11 years old from Virgil Junior High, Virgil Middle School, we're going into a brick building that used to be the California Democratic, parties, spacing that allowed for Filipinos to have some office space. We walked in, we heard these ethnic drum beats pass through the convention or the conference room and see youth dancing cultural dances. And there's pizza right there. So being able to be youth that, instead of being out in the hood, we would go to the spot hang out with some Mexican kids, some Thai kids, some JA kids, doing leadership development trainings, doing community cleanups, murals. And there's always somebody that brought food. So every time you had a march, every time you had a rally, there was food to prepare, and there was food after. Many times we contributed cooking barbecue. So those were some of the things that were facets of our development, not just in historic Filipinotown, but literally here. Chili Visions used to be a community event where the different nonprofits hung out together and had a chili cook-off. And after, you'd watch a film. So we were hanging out, representing SIPA, but trying everybody else's chili, hanging out with the homies that we've grown up with. So I think from that component, from being an at-risk youth, then become a volunteer, a staff member, then going back as a small business client, and then now sitting on the board, it's a full circle of like a community investing in dumbass kids. And you let them be dumbass kids. You yell at them, you give them something to eat, you tell them about their culture, but other people's cultures. You give them a ride home. You know, you yell at them some more. And long term, I'm really kind of, this is wild. I'm here, I'm a product of all of y'all, of this space, of these pillars. So this is really surreal.
So can you talk a little bit about like the literal assistance that you got from SIPA when you were trying out this business plan?
So the Asian Pacific Islander Small Business Program that many of the legacy organizations are here, they each had a coach and a programming and funding that allowed everybody to have access to coaching, a savings program, lecturers that would come in from different expertise. And of course, you know, we're a sign-in sheet. But if you sign up and you participate in using those programs, funding comes into the nonprofits, and they could, if they didn't have the resources or the know-how, because it was a consortium, because it was a collective, they'd refer you to Thai CDC, to KYCC, to LTSC, and all these. It wasn't just a SIPA counselor for Zana, but it was Ron Fong. It was like these huge amount of different counselors that we had throughout the community that gave us support. So that was kind of our thing. Instead of door knockers, and technology was starting to take advantage of people coming from the San Gabriel Valley to eat Korean tacos. We're hood famous. So if we use a phone and we let you email us to deliver food 15 minutes before you needed it in a location that's now, we don't need a Tom's guide. That's technology. This was happening in 2008. And we're delivering food instead of 50 clients, one client, first birthday. Delivering your food, calling you, letting you know we're pulling up. And they became our sponsors. They wrote Yelp reviews. We shot up to #1 on Yelp as a restaurant when we were still just catering. And eventually, when we found a location down the block from where we all grew up, the community either literally rolled up their sleeves and helped paint, knew somebody from a different community center or a kitchen that was closing down, or whatever it was, and gave us support. So this is like that RPG game where you're just hitting slimes with a wood sword, or Lemonade Tycoon. As after you sell enough, soda, you buy, another unit. This is for now going on 15 years. This is something that not just SIPA, but every nonprofit, every organization, we're here, literally gonna feed you next. That's part of the process of what really is the community doing to continue to keep us alive.
But you're also helping to keep the community alive. Your mom's a nurse, right?
My mom is a retired operating room technician out of St. Vincent.
Okay, so medical. My mom was a nurse. Came in the 50s when she couldn't immigrate, just had to keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Never actually had immigrant status. It was only after 1965 when she was waiting for some kind of resident visa that she was able to finally get it. This is after she married my father and had me, so I was no help to her either. I was no anchor baby. But on Friday, when we were talking about the intersection of race and health and race and wealth and the arts, one of the things that our county chief medical officer, touched on was the fact that people of color in the service industry, particularly those in the health industry, were hit the hardest by the COVID crisis. In fact, it was like 25% of all the healthcare workers that were impacted were Filipino American. And that just makes me really sad. Like, that even now, that race kind of contributes to that. But you were doing some amazing work with uplifting those workers during that time. And I don't want to embarrass you, but I want you to talk about it, because it is about community.
March 15th, we had to lay off all of our staff. And as we said goodbye to them, we gave them couple scoops of rice, couple pounds of rice, some squash, like a roll of toilet paper. Like literally, we aren't sure what's gonna happen next. Utilizing the social media platform, I was doing PSAs saying like, look, I don't know if we'll see each other, so take care. On basic level like that. And we saw it throughout the pandemic where we were, how people were struggling. And early on, my mom was getting calls to come back. Right? Christine's mom is a retired physician. Are you available to come back? We weren't sure what was happening with the pandemic, so if you walked in to buy some food to go, we're wiping the roof. What are we doing? And it was exhausting. So we were ready to let go, and we realized that many of these healthcare providers were working 16-hour shifts, sometimes 18-hour shifts, then picking up their kids and couldn't buy groceries. And then couldn't cook, so what are we talking about here? So we were like, people are buying food ahead, 2 plates here, 4 plates there, on varying times of the day. And somebody said, the Umami Fund said, I want to sponsor 800. We're like, $800, dope. we could do a lot with this. Got the check, and it was more than $800. Said, no, 800 people. We're like, logistically, how do you do that? So, when we were watching professional athletes and celebrities play horse on ESPN for 2 weeks, we went back to our catering roots and delivered food to ICUs, hospital personnel, EMTs, everybody that was out there, on a spreadsheet. And for 18 months we did that, and we delivered 100,000 meals throughout Los Angeles, Southern California. And it was one of those things like, a lot of our folks, they passed. Mm-hmm. Literally the people that we were giving food to, some of them are gone. So it's one of those hard dynamics to understand that on top of people taking care of people, they're being attacked because of the way they look. They're being attacked because of their views on trying to take care of everybody. And that's the dynamics that we, as a community, as a nonprofit, but a business supported by nonprofits, we need these light pillars in the city. Because it might not be the pandemic, it might be some other shit that goes on. Do we have safe havens for our community to recharge, to plan, to prepare, to get ready, like this? Like, these are part of these jewels of our city, and we have to utilize them. But part of it is how the community comes together for it.
And I don't know if you realize it, but it really helped people in the community that wanted to help in some way, but didn't really know how, or that were looking for some type of personal connection. And I know, like, when I told my mom about what you were doing, she was like, is there something we can do? And I said, well, we can give money so that they can do this, because I can't go out there because, I'm taking care of her. She was 94 when the pandemic started, so I couldn't risk being out and bringing something back home. So I think it provided a way for the community to do something when we felt kind of powerless. So thank you very much for that.
I think what it shows is that there's ways that we can figure out how to work together. There's ways that we can continue to use whatever effort that we have an opportunity to do goes a long way. That's what I'm saying. Like, even our stories, if you invest in these people, invest in our community, long term, if everybody's looking out for these youngsters,
So I want to kind of open up the conversation a little bit, and Curtis, I wanted to start with you about so your family runs a restaurant. Do you ever get to eat other things at home, or is it always restaurant stuff all the time? So how outside of the restaurant were family traditions around food passed down?
It was mostly the restaurant, but we could experiment ourselves with the ingredients. Yeah, sorry.
Hi. Yeah, we mostly ate at the restaurant, but occasionally, my grandfather would take us out for McDonald's or something, or my dad would, at 9 o'clock at night, the newspapers would come out, and my dad would like to drive downtown and pick up the papers fresh off the press. So we'd swing by this, in Detroit they have this thing called Lafayette, Coney Islands, which are really, really good. But yeah, so we would have that occasionally. We did, but I would say 80%, 90% of the stuff we ate was always Asian. Yeah. And my mom got to be a really good cook. It's kind of interesting. I say everybody in my family had their specialties. My grandmother made her sweets. My grandfather made his barbecue meats. My dad, who was born in America, actually made the best Chinese food. But my mom, who was born in China, actually made the best Western food. A cultural switch. Yeah.
How do you think that happened?
It just makes me think that, we oftentimes think that we are struggling with our identity and trying to fit in and things like that, but our parents are also going through the same process as well, right? My dad probably was trying to make a connection to his Asian identity. My mom, who had an arranged marriage and came here when she was 17 years old, probably was trying to fit in, and so the one book that she actually ever had was the Better Homes and Garden cookbook, the checkered one. That was the one book I ever saw her carrying. Yeah.
We had one in our house.
I think everybody had that book, right? It was a memory process. So I think that part of that was their journey, right? And how they used food to sort of make connections to whether it is perceived past or this future. And that's how they navigated that space.
Erin O'Brien, how do you integrate both sides of the family in how you approach food today?
Well, I joke that I am a cordon bleu trained chef, but my mom actually went to cordon bleu when we were living in London. And so she's a pastry chef. And so once I got to high school, she was like, if you want to eat something, you will learn to cook. Or you can have ramen, so I learned to cook trained by her. She would come home from a 13-hour day and be like, cut this, not like that, like this, and put her feet up because you're standing for 13 hours a day. And I find that so I'm an artist. I cannot draw at all, despite having an art degree. But my medium is food. I use food to tell those stories. I use food to articulate the things that, visual artists would do by painting, but I do in an interactive space. And I also find that, because it is the broadest common denominator, to go beyond the paradigm of the International Food Day and what do your people eat to a sort of understanding of the context of militarization and colonization and all of that in food, and then that's what I do in my artwork. So, for example, one of my early pieces that directly links my parents, I wanted to reflect on what my dad did, which at the time was overseeing the dismantling of North Korea's nuclear reactor in Pyongyang, and my mother, who, is a pastry chef. And our family tradition is to make gingerbread cookies, and then we hang them on the tree, and then everyone comes over for the holidays and finds their gingerbread on the tree. Each one's personally decorated, And so I built a replica of North Korea's nuclear reactor out of gingerbread, as one does. And then we had a series of events where, you know, we invited people to come dismantle it for peace. And so everybody came and ate the gingerbread. You know,
How old were you?
Well, this was in graduate school.
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah.
That's awesome though.
I was 12. But it was the way that I could connect that legacy, that lineage. I mean, I also, of course, it's complex because I'm Erin O'Brien. There's nothing that's not complex because it also talks about legacies, family legacies, right? Like Bush Jr., Bush Sr., Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-il. So like these family legacies, what are your legacies and how do you embrace those? And like, so my dad's version of peace is to go over there and help monitor, you know, how many fuel rods are coming out of the reactor. And so I'm taking on that legacy by doing the nuclear reactor out of gingerbread with a Mack truck out of chocolate and pirouette palm trees and, you know, that kind of thing.
I want you to decorate like Christmas tree. So you were a butcher's apprentice,
Yes. Yes.
which is that what led to the sausage making? And talk about the sausage making.
Yeah, okay, I'll talk about sausages. Because I can't paint. I was an apprentice butcher because I was like, this is like free cooking school, right? And like I can go and learn the trade and be, you know, in the moment, like learn all of it on the fly. But you know, as things are, artists don't actually get paid, and having a part-time job for minimum wage also does not pay very much. And I was also adjuncting and teaching cooking classes in the parks for the Summer Night Lights program, and I was like, this is not sustainable, you know, I have to like reduce some things. And I was driving with some friends and they were like, you know, you probably make as much money selling sausages as you do adjuncting at colleges and universities in Southern California. We did the math and it added up. But so the sausages started as homages, right? Like, you know, you would build a statue for someone as an homage, and I was making sausages as an homage to friends and family members who, like, I wanted to honor. So, like, there was El Pato Chino from, like, back in the day when we used to go to Full House and order the cold tea at 3 a.m. and get a roast duck. And so it's like a duck sausage in a little bao bun, you know, with a corn tortilla, you know, so it's like mixing those cultures that my friends who were in this band called Rice and Beans, I don't know if any of you back in the day, you know, like would sort of represent that sort of culture. I made several for my dad. There's nothing sexual about that. So like my dad, because he was in North Korea the whole time, he wanted to buy this roast chicken, but because he's a foreigner, they wouldn't let him buy it. But for Christmas, one of the officials in North Korea gifted him this roast chicken, and he said it was the best chicken he ever ate. So I make a crispy chicken skins folded into gochujang, chicken, garlic, tree chive sausage, right? Like, so it's like telling stories, right? The 8.5-year tour, my dad, 8.5 years in Vietnam, for a not Vietnamese person, that's a lot of time. And so I made a sausage that's like pork and lemongrass and Guinness beer, and you know, it's like, how do you tell a story and honor people through food? And so I was doing them in the galleries, and people were like, these are actually really good sausages.
So they got to eat them.
Yeah, so in the gallery it was like, you tell me a story and then I'll give you a sausage, right? And we'll share, right? Like a lot of my food is like that. I did a Hapa hot pot, so like people would like share their stories of Hapa foods that they kind of like grew up with, and then we all get to eat hot pot together, you know? But then people were like, can you just do this? So I was doing it as pop-ups for quite a while. But like, you know, I even talked to Johneric, I'm like, how do I open a restaurant? What do we do? You know, like, but it's not ostensibly sustainable. It's challenging. For me, ethically, in terms of like production, meat sourcing, employee labor, all of those things, like how do you maintain those ethics and keep it going? Like you're always operating on the on the edge. So I just keep making new performance pieces with food to, like I did a series after the shootings in Atlanta where I baked sourdough bread that was made with charcoal, black millet, sesame seeds, as a fundraiser for Red Canary Song, who was organizing around massage parlor workers, because like I was up at 3 in the mourning like this broad Asian American community, the attacks on our community, and like how do you, for me, mourning I cook, so like if I'm chopping 5 pounds of apples, you should just ask if I'm okay. So like I use the food as a way to engage folks in those conversations and thinking about the politics. I do a whole decolonial militarization menu, like I have these ribs that I call my Mark 47 ribs because you can't call them napalm ribs or burn your face off ribs, like that's apparently too brazen. I don't know. But the Mark 47 plane is the plane that dropped hundreds of tons of napalm on Vietnam. And so, the ribs are delicious, but like you also insert a conversation about politics and, what else do you do with an MFA in performance art? I make decolonial popcorn, Gio's Post Pop. It's like I have a flavor that's like Orientalize this, right? It's like honey, ginger with a little kick, and it's like, this is a way to have a conversation at the table about politics and race and food, settle. Yeah.
So at the beginning of the pandemic, I discovered TikTok. And when you sign up, you like pick what you want. And I picked like dogs, food, and travel. And it was such a happy world with all the little puppy videos. And I learned how to make bread and actually inspired me to go on and learn to make bread. And then I watched the wrong video and suddenly I was on the wrong side of TikTok. And, it was, but some of it was, I was watching these creators or content creators that were just, I felt, freely appropriating cuisines and culture from other cultures. There was one, I don't even think he's a chef, I think he just enjoyed cooking, but he's gotten so much notoriety, and he one day was making, on a cold New York day, I like to make this noodle dish, and it was a full-on, Vietnamese noodle, hot noodles, all the ingredients were Asian, and he never once mentioned where it came from. If you thought, it sounded like he came up with this idea. And people started calling him out. And he just blocked everybody. And he just kept going on and on. And then I saw him on Good Morning America one day and I was like, this is ridiculous. And there's people that get called out all the time for this. There's the whole boba controversy now, another boba controversy. With better boba, because the boba that comes from Taiwan is not good for you. It's like, boba I don't think really should be good for you, it's just good, right? I don't know. So where, and this, I would like all of you to kind of just discuss this, is what's the line between appreciating a culture and appropriating it? And just jump in.
I'm pretty open-minded and liberal about these things because I think that cultures always change and they adapt. That's the beauty of it. Particularly, for our restaurant, we were in Detroit. There are no Asian people there. Very, very small, but so we had to change our palate. And that was the piece that I just did for America's Test Kitchen. We have this dish called almond boneless chicken, which is really popular in Detroit, but it's not really found anywhere else. And for this episode, I wanted to investigate the origins of it because my grandmother had always said that we invented it. I was like, okay, I just accepted it. But I wanted to do a deep dive into it, and it turned out that it actually has this really interesting history. Is that it's a dish that is kind of a marriage between a traditional Chinese dish called almond pressed duck, and African Americans' love for fried chicken and particularly white meat. Because what happened was in Detroit in the 1950s, they destroyed the original Chinatown and the black neighborhood of Black Bottom. And for the first time, the two communities had to relocate to another area in the city, and we both found ourselves in the Cass Corridor. And because of that, that's how this dish sort of came about. It has this connection to this history of the civil rights movement, you know, in the city. And so if you were to just hold on to things too tightly and not be open to change, then you wouldn't come up with new things. Now, there is a line where you are, if you're offensive in terms of how you're talking about it, then that's problematic. But the idea of people sharing and learning and adapting, I'm all for that, you know. So yeah.
Or when they spell the name wrong. I mean, you know, I think that there is a line, but to me, authenticity is like how your mom makes it or how your family made it. Like my mom used, my mom uses rice paper to make her spring rolls. There are people who use the wrapper, the long-time wrapper, the lumpia wrapper. And so if it's in that, I'm like, nope, that's not how my mom made it. No way, you know. So authenticity is out the window. You know, I do a great impression of Rachel Ray's faux pho. She makes a pork pho where she puts the entire lime in it. Because who zests your pho? Anyways, people think like, oh my gosh, you're Vietnamese, do you love pho? I'm like, no. I mean, I do, but like, I don't eat it every day. Like, do you know how many Vietnamese soups there are? There's like hundreds. There are better ones, actually. But like, you know, they're like, do you make it at home? I'm like, why? There are people who had the same broth for 100 years going in the same pot. Why would I try to replicate that? I can't do that, you know? And you know, I think too, like, it's kind of like I want to go around and ask Americans, like, oh my God, do you just love roast beef? Is it so good? Do you do like roast beef sandwich every day? Like, what's your jam? Meatloaf? You know, like.
Hey, my jam is meatloaf.
That's right. You know, it's like that one dish is a comfort food to many people, but like, you know, my comfort food is matzo ball soup. You know.
But you also brought up this issue of authenticity. Sorry to jump in.
Go.
There are a lot of people a lot of Chinese people who will say that the food that my family made, like egg foo young and chop suey, is not authentic Chinese food. And I'm like, it's authentic to me. I mean, like, you know, we're Chinese people, we made it, you know. So,
You know, there's ABC Chinese food restaurants in Vietnam now.
great.
Yeah, like they're just, you know, before there was Chinatown, there's a whole Chinatown, right? Because, you know, China, same. But like, there is now like ABC, like American Chinese food in Vietnam that was brought over by Vietnamese who came to the US and were like, we love Chinese food, American style Chinese food, and then brought it back to Vietnam, you know, like.
So there is this question of like, you know, sort of flipping it on its head, like when we have cultural food here and we bring in other things and I think maybe you and I can connect on this, is that we're made to not feel like we're not either white enough or we're not Asian enough because we're mixed. And so we get a lot of crap for that. But you...
I get it from both sides.
When I was going to say, like, one of my favorite things is when I open up Instagram and I see a post from Johneric and it's got that little thing in the corner where it says that there's multiple pictures. And it's just screenshot after screenshot after screenshot of people dogging you about it not being authentic Filipino food. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. And then I read his comment. So how do you deal with that? Because, like, I could not deal with it.
I mean, part of it is, let's look at it. We do American cuts of barbecue with a Filipino flavor. It's authentic. It's familiar to Filipinos, familiar to Americans, but distinctly a Los Angeles house party creation. That is not what I have had in my Filipino household from my mom's region, of particularly a town in that province. I've never had that before in my life, so that is not authentic.
But I've seen...
And I also get, this Ching Town don't know nothing about real American barbecue. So having to address all of these, one, because part of it is, you know, it's fun. It's great. Love it. But also you have to be mindful of one, if that's what I'm spending my time on, and if we don't want somebody coming to the shop and shooting us up. You know what I mean? Like there's these elements of how do we attack them and challenge their concepts of it, but also be true to what we need to do is make sure we take care of our customers so that they can pay a fair fee for what they're enjoying, so our staff can have wages and we can continue this process. And we've been doing it now going on 15 years, and we still get it from both sides. But it's kind of dynamic. For the Filipino community, we'll embrace something if it makes money. No one, unless you're Pampangan, we're eating sisig. Until Anthony Bourdain was like, man, this shit is dumb. Now everybody was selling sisig. So it becomes this element of, if it makes dollar sense, then people will move into putting the effort into it. Now when it goes down to the conversation of authentic or appropriation, I think you have to look at your intent. I mean, let's just be honest, if you're just trying to get paid, then that's definitely, you're taking. But if you're offering something that you find of value, that you have a narrative story to it and a connection, and you're offering people from around the world to have a sample of that, then that's authentic or that's appreciation.
Yeah.
But you also have to be mindful of what's happening in the world, so you have to always address it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes what if somebody's from, the houseless community coming through your shop, and you trying to just be mindful of like, look, you might need something, but at the same time, there's folks here that can be pressed up on, making sure that you're authentic to just be mindful of somebody's needs, but also taking care of the folks, that are coming through.
Yeah.
So,
But I think it's also hard with Filipino food because, Pampangan sisig is different than Visayan sisig. The way adobo is cooked in some places is so different than the adobo. And the way that my mother makes adobo is not the way that I make adobo. Like I make it completely different because I like it a certain way. But I don't think I think at a certain point, like I've seen kare-kare, which if you don't know is usually made with oxtail, which I love. But I've been seeing it more and more on even Filipino restaurants with like short rib or something else. And I do think oxtail is gonna be the next short rib. I don't know why. So like invest in oxtail.
There's only
Keep it
one
cheese!
tail.
No!
There's
Tell
only
them
one
secrets
tail.
about that. Oh man!
Poor animal.
Sorry, but how much do you feel like you have to cater to, like, is there like, I have to cater to other tastes kind of feeling?
I mean, I think it depends on who's the judge, right? Like, I make great Italian food. I lived in Italy. Is that appreciation or appropriation? I don't know. My clients, when I do private chefing, only want my Vietnamese food, And, I make a salad that's literally called Nacho Mama salad because my mom would look at it and be like, what the hell is on this? Why so many things? Like, this is not original, But, like, we can riff on that. But I remember there was an episode of that horrible Gordon Ramsay show. Anyways, they're in New Orleans, and they're making shrimp dishes, and the one chef who's white and has a Vietnamese boyfriend, whole nother story, made like a Vietnamese shrimp, and the judges, Gordon Ramsay was like, well, this is not authentic Vietnamese food because it has like tomato and butter. And I'm like, my great uncle's most famous dish we call chu's shrimp, which was stellar standout at his restaurant that he had for many years in Paris called Rue Mandarin, because the French are like, we don't want to admit that we colonized the Vietnamese people, so if you just make us Chinese food, we're cool with that. And he also had to adjust and cater his restaurant to French tastes, even though he had been in Paris from the early 50s on. Like a lot of my grandparents and family members were educated in France and then came back to Vietnam. So like that dish is like garlic, butter, whiskey, tomatoes, shrimp, little lemongrass, and it's like, that's a very traditional, authentic dish to me and my family. But like someone like Gordon Ramsay is like, tomatoes, they don't have tomatoes in Vietnam. I'm like, yeah, we do, actually, dude. Like, there's tomatoes, like, banh mi here, all of a sudden, is everywhere. Like, there's a banh mi on the plain flight menu. I was like, oh, what? Like, British Airways, you know. Slater 50/50s had a banh mi on their menu.
The
right
Philly
here.
cheesesteak banh mi, I will tell you, I'm not angry about.
Exactly, but like, you know, so it sort of depends, like, what's the context, you know? Like, there's this unnamed chef, because I make fun of him a lot, you know, and he talks about his wings that are famous, his fish sauce wings, blah, 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 that he tried at a food side restaurant shack, and like, it turns out it's his prep chef's family meal recipe, you know, that he's told this whole long tale about, even in Bon Appetit magazine, about the history of this dish. And it's like, dude, because you're not Vietnamese or Thai. And like, now he's made a whole industry off of this, you know, and it's like, the context, I think, matters.
Any last word on this before we take some questions from the audience?
I think going back to authenticity, we have to understand we're not where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So what do you do with the ingredients available to you? I think that's a part of the conversation. Is your parents worked hard to try to give you a memory that they had that you will never have.
Yeah.
But there's certain things that aren't available.
Yeah.
So what do they do to get there?
Yeah.
And of course, we will never compete with your grandma's cooking. But let's remember, grandma never gave you the bill. Never charged you.
There's a quote.
So, of course, that's priceless. But if we enjoy other grandma's cooking, other mom's cooking, other communities' cooking, and then know that those dollars are part of reinvestment into the community, or just being a part of the community, right? Just even to offer a space for people to convene together is vital. So, authentic.
So we have time for questions from the audience. So does anybody have a question they want to be brave? And we do ask that you use the mic.
This is more of a lighthearted question. So if for 1 week you had to eat food, but it either had to be the same texture or the same taste for that entire week, what would you choose? The same texture or the same taste?
I'm a texture guy, I think. Yeah.
Taste?
I don't know. I don't like bananas, and when I got COVID last month, I ate a banana, and taste and texture, I was like, never eating a banana again. This is disgusting. Why are you people eating bananas? So like, I don't know necessarily. I think taste maybe, given my reaction when I did lose my taste and smell from COVID, I was like, no! Which my wife thought was very dramatic, but I mean, it's my whole world. Like, I like such a sense of myself around food, my art practice, my work, you know, so to me, I would say taste.
I like this question because we don't have to lose. Right? If we say texture, let me get roasted chicken. You didn't say we can't have sauces. So if we can have every different sauce that's available for a week, have roasted chicken, we good.
You don't want soggy chicken.
You know, you wanted that boom, just
Roasted
get some sauces on it. You're good.
Greatest anything? Either.
Either's fine.
Just feed me.
Hi, all. Thank you for your words. All three of you are inspirations, and I'm glad to have heard you all speak today. But anyway, aside from flowers, a lot of times when we talk about different Asian American like diasporas, a lot of times the idea of assimilation and sometimes the approximation to whiteness comes into play. And when it comes to food, I do notice, especially with the rise of social media, there's like a lot of catering to like trying to get people to come in and see it as a new trendy hip hopping in place. And I wanted to know how that has affected each of you in your proximity to community and food, and if that has been a hindrance for your relationship with community and food, or if it's been helpful. Sorry, I know that was a lot.
We only have 15 seconds of attention now.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. On your phone.
Oh.
Okay? 15 seconds is not over.
And we're out.
So how do we get people's attention to go out? I'll be honest, I'm really spoiled growing up in downtown Los Angeles, Echo Park, historic Filipinotown, Rampart District. There's so many Asians everywhere. So the food that we're eating is more really catered to us. I think that's one thing about the Parks Finest is that we've created something that all of us have been talking about. And we can convene on it. But it doesn't matter if people don't show up. It doesn't matter if it's difficult for people to travel from West Covina, from the Valley, from Irvine, to come out and hang out here. So it's one of those things where it's like, we've been on TV. It doesn't matter to people anymore. So these social media folks who are now, they have a lot of power. And I think that's kind of the dynamics that we struggle with, is how do we turn on their power to really be impactful? And you see it with these food bloggers, these TikTokers. They're going to all of these spots all over the world, particularly in Los Angeles, and you can see how much that's driven traffic. So that's amazing. You know, I'm like the Statue of Liberty in front of H&R Block, spinning a sign to try to get you to come to the restaurant. And I'm doing it every day with Chris, and we find different content. We're gonna take some of this and apply it. But there's dynamics because it's just us. It's just us that's liking it and sharing it or commenting on it. And there's these kind of struggles that we feel that there's a power with our likes, our shares, our saves, our comments, and in so many realms of the world right now, that it exposes everybody else to something that is important and special for us to understand. So, hopefully that.
Yeah.
15 seconds, my bad.
No, you're good.
I'm sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum growing up in Detroit, right? Because there are so few Asians there. And the way we sort of looked at our dining room and who was coming in, community was Detroit, right? It's all of Detroit. It was everybody. And, I guess Detroiters are very, because we get shit upon by everybody else, but there's a very strong connection to that hometown. And so for me, and the food that we served, it was always about appealing to Detroiters. So I feel that connection much stronger. So that proximity to, even though we were in what was nominally a Chinatown area, it was actually a pretty Pan-Asian area, but there were only about 200 Asian families total, right? So it's not a large community that we had to draw upon. And so we did have to make connections with other people. So maybe we knew that we couldn't sustain our business just appealing to only Asians, right? And so because of that, we did have to reconceptualize community in different ways.
Yeah, I was, for many years, a narrative strategy trainer, showing folks how to, media messaging in political organizing, community organizing, civic engagement. And, I was doing a project in San Diego in this area that was, we had 5 different translators. We had Karen refugees from Burma. We had Vietnamese refugees. We had Latinos. We had African Americans and white folks all in this room talking about gentrification. And how it was impacting them, sitting around eating tacos and enchiladas. And I'm like, this actually is what holds us together. And even our experiences may seem disparate, it's the food that really connects it. And so I developed out of that a performance series called Refugee Resistance Menu, thinking about those ghosts that we're seeking, right? And having a menu that has Burmese, Iraqi, Vietnamese, Syrian food all on one dish. Because as refugees, even though we came at different times, we all have that connection, and that holds us together. In organizing, social justice organizing here in LA, we all ordered from TJ Express, 213-833-0303 is the number. It's the same number, it's never changed. I like number 17A, the basil. It's really good, but that was the thing that connected us together. But I recently did I called it pickle camp, but it was a fermentation residency in Tennessee with Sandal Katz. And, someone was like, whoever heard of chili crisp before last year, right? And I was like, thousands of years, dude, people have been eating chili crisp. This is not a new thing. It may be new to Tennessee. But like, this is not a new invention. Someone didn't magically be like, oh my gosh, let's make chili crisp. What happens when you put these together, right? So it's like, you know, it's new to some people. It's ancient history to others, you know? Like some of the oldest things that they're finding it's all like, you know, pickle jars, you know? There's a sandwich shop in Pompeii that they just uncovered, you know? Like, it's the food that holds that history.
Questions? Raise your hand so I can see you. Oh, okay.
Give you some context, and then I apologize for being long-winded. I'm going to flip the assimilation question. Your guys' family, my family's from Colombia, and when your families came here, they had to assimilate and don't speak Spanish, don't speak Tagalog. We're American now. We're going to eat Salisbury steak. We're going to eat, you know, American food. In growing up and then cooking your own dishes and writing about your books, how much has assimilation from your families, from your parents say, you know, don't do this because we don't want people to come in and shoot up the restaurant. We don't want people to talk about our families. How much has that influenced you, and how much have you pushed back?
I mean, everything I do is a pushback, but like during the like Occupy movements, I remember I was like flying to Oregon. So, you know, that gate at the airport was very white, and I had brought like my fish sauce and my whole like thing, and I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be awesome. This is like my olfactory resistance. I'm bringing fish sauce on a plane. But like, you know, and I had my little 99% like bandana. So I think that like it's all kind of like, but then how much do we even police ourselves? Like I remember one holiday, you know, like my auntie was like putting the duck together, and she had the feet hopping out like this of the like platter and the head on this side. And I was like, Yimai, there's white people here. You know? Like, you're gonna walk out with this like whole duck, you know? Like I don't know. Like it varies, right? Like I think that we, you know, because I was in a mixed race family, like there wasn't that sort of question as much. My mom still to this day makes 2 dinners. Dad wants potatoes and steak. Mom wants tofu and rice. You know, like it's more about, you know, who's the audience? Like who, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, growing up, my parents never really pressured us to assimilate one way or the other. You know, if anything, I think that pressure was coming maybe from myself, just trying to fit in at school with the other kids. And so we originally were in a more, you know, mixed race neighborhood. First in the African American neighborhood, then mixed race, and then eventually I went to a high school that was like 98% white. And the way I tried to assimilate was, okay, in my defense, this was the 80s, during the Reagan Revolution, and so I assimilated by becoming a Republican. And so I was like the Asian Alex.
Nobody knew this about you.
You have to read the book. That's the whole journey of how did I like, you know, unlearn some of these ideas, because I'm just trying to fit in with all these white kids. And so one of the criticisms about Asian Americans is that we're not very loyal to America. So I was going to out-patriot all the white kids. I was going to be like so like, you know, yeah. But I felt it wasn't coming from my parents at all. They were horrified I was a Republican. But it was me just trying to fit in at school. Yeah.
My mom migrated from the medical field. My dad enlisted in the Navy from the Philippines. They met here, went to Dodger games for dates, ended up with 4 boys on the run of the family. She grew up, her father was a fisherman, her mom was a fishmonger. She never cooked. So how do I feed 4 boys, plus my parents, plus my sisters, and anybody that comes through after my shift, food that I don't know how to make? So remembering what she tasted, she went down a journey and learned how to cook. And at the same time, she cooked whatever was available and what her kids enjoyed. So I was in the LA Times in 1998 about the Asian American experience growing up. 4 sections. I was part of the youth. And, you know, last day of school, Union Avenue Elementary, you bring some food from your house, stuff you ate. So I brought hamburgers. My teacher was like, not your food. I'm like, what do you mean? We had this yesterday. I mean, that's American food, and Filipino food, Asian food. I was like, damn, I should have brought rice then. You know what I mean? Instead of patty, instead of bun. What the fuck, what are we talking about? So the concept of assimilating, like, I grew up watching Hulk Hogan. You know, I'm a jock that wants to do theater, right? You look at me. But damn, anomaly where we're trying to like convey this is who we are, this is what we're about, and it's the dynamics that to Filipinos back home in the Philippines. No, I am not. As much as I'm holding with our crew this flag that our community should enjoy. But this is the thing about Filipinos. We love everybody else's food. Go to a restaurant, who's some of their most consistent customers? The Filipino big-ass families. So we were willing to pay and have that American experience, but we cook at home. So we'll never pay for Filipino food. Crazy.
So, Curtis, it's okay. I was a Republican as well. It's I think it was where we grew up when we grew up, and like on Friday, and when we had the relaunch, I was talking about how I wanted to be president, and I think part of that was that desire to be super American man.
Yeah.
Like that's going to make me fit in somehow. We have time for one more question. And I can't see everybody, so you gotta really raise your hand and don't be shy. Nobody's gonna ever see this anywhere else. No questions? I have a question. So, if we weren't having the wonderful food from Parks Finest tonight and you were going out for dinner tonight, is there a particular restaurant that you would go to? Something new, something old?
That's a really awful question. I just didn't think about parks all day. I'm not thinking about anything else.
I'm gonna go with the ghost answer. Like, I wish that I could have, Good Girl Dinette. See, it's like, and it's that memory of it that really, sticks with me. And like, that's family, that's community, that's how, I know deep through Omoy, which was the queer Viet, group back in the 90s, yeah.
I've been going to Suihiro a lot, the one here, because if they keep saying they're going to close, I keep like, okay, because for me, eating isn't just about the food itself, but oftentimes it's about the location and the senses that you get from it. And so I want to be back in that space. I know they have a newer, bigger location just a few blocks away, but I want to go to this one.
Yeah, the counter.
Yeah.
I was about to say that same answer.
Oh, okay.
No, but that's part of it, right? We're here. So where are we going to go? I wish we went to Oiwake's.
Oh, yeah, that place.
After Tuesday nights, that the church converted into a theater, we'd spend $10 at Wylands and walk out.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's these spots that our community has spent their time with, and we've shared stories with, and there's places that we need to continue to support, but I think it's setting.
Yeah. Can I share a story that I shared with them in the green room? The book came out October 17th, and so I've been doing this big national tour, and I was in Massachusetts, in Cambridge, and at the end during the Q&A, this one audience member got up and she asked, has anybody here eaten at Chung's before? And nobody else had because we're in Massachusetts, but then she started to say how she used to go there all the time with her family as a kid, and she just really loved going there, but that her mom has dementia now. Right? She doesn't remember much. But then when she told her that she was going to this reading from one of the kids from Chung's, all of these memories started coming out. She could remember all these details about our food and stuff like that. And she said she felt like she had her mom back, for the first time in a long time. And it's that's what food does, right? And as someone who was part of a restaurant, that's the beauty, and that's what I was telling him. Running a restaurant is great because you can be part of these people's lives, even to a degree that you don't even know. Like, you think of all the people that come in and have their celebrations, their birthday parties and stuff like that, but then what about the people that come in week after week and really, you're like an anchor in some ways. And so, food, memory, place. It's all,
Yeah.
it's a really great, that's why I feel like I had such a great childhood, growing up in a Chinese restaurant. Yeah.
You got me twice, man. I'm like,
I swear I moved to Little Tokyo shortly after I got the job here because I take care of my mom. She's 96. And so I wanted to be close. And I swear living in Little Tokyo is going to be the end of me with all the food, all the bread and the sweets and the mochi and the coffees and all the different types of restaurants. It's not just the Japanese American restaurants, but Korean and Filipino. And I'm just, it's a struggle now to keep the weight off. And I'm slowly losing it, as you can see. My mom still cooks to this day. She's 96. She's known for her lumpia. She used to make wrappers by hand, but she doesn't do that anymore. Just, I always have to stock up on the frozen ones. I don't make her cook. I just want that to be understood. She does have her own, if you will. But she really cooks mostly Filipino food now. But she also does cook me occasionally my favorite meatloaf. So that's a mom's love, if anything. So as we wrap up, can you just tell us where we can find you? These sausages I need to know about. I know, just tell us where we can find you.
At home.
Okay. What time can we come over?
I'm currently working on not cooking and writing.
Okay.
And fiber sculptures and things. So, I'm not out in the world cooking these days.
Okay.
I'm cooking a lot in here.
But we can still find your work in places, right? Meet My Friends?
Meet My Friends it's a pop-up. It's been on hold because I haven't been cooking.
Okay.
I'm on the internet too.
Okay.
Yeah,
we can find your book where?
Well, you can buy it anywhere, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, stuff like that, but I've been on
local independent bookstore.
And local independent bookstores, and I don't know if you still carry it in your gift shop or not. Okay.
Romans.
But yeah, Romans, any of them. And I left postcards out there. If you guys want to pick one up, I'll sign them for you too if you want. But I've been on a big tour. I did over 50 readings before the book came out, including 5 in Europe. The book came out October 17th, and since then I've done about 40 events, throughout the country. I have another 50 lined up for next spring already, so it's kind of really great response. I mean, it's, like you said, it made all these best of the year lists and stuff like that. CBS Saturday Morning News did an 8-minute segment on me. You can find that online. NBC News followed me back to Detroit.
CBS Mornings? Right?
CBS Saturday Morning News. It's a really nice piece. I think, it's very nostalgic to go back with them. So you can, and Time Magazine excerpted the book. So it's really gotten a lot of play. So you can find me online there. If you want to check out my schedule, it's at curtisfromdetroit.com. I also put on some of my films. It's online for free there if you guys want to check out what I do. And the America's Test Kitchen, it just dropped on Thursday, so you can find it on there. It's a podcast. That's probably where to find me.
Okay, got Eric?
2 miles west on Temple Street.
Let's go west.
Yeah, so we're lucky enough, we're partners next door with Thunderbolt, so this subsection of the community, we're lucky enough to win World's Best, number 88, as a watering hole, the people's watering hole, as well as right next door is the park's finest. So the idea is that it belongs to you, but at the same time, if you have purchasing power or influential power for luncheons and catering events, we'll bring it to you. And I think this is a real beautiful, this kind of feels like my quinceañera. So we're here, and we're gonna walk over, put on my apron with Chris, and we're gonna feed you guys up. So this is kind of like the event that is really kind of, I'm here. I'm up and down this block all the time. Everybody, this is the hood. This is our hood. This is our community. So same thing, if we're here together, and I think that's part of having this opportunity to recharge and then move forth.
Can we have a nice round of applause?